smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. A good little piece in the Wall Street Journal from Glenn Elmers, who's a visiting scholar at Hillsdale College. He is writing a book on Harry Jaffa, who's a great academic. He, as far as I'm concerned, wrote the definitive biography on Abraham Lincoln called New Birth of Freedom. But it's much bigger than that. For those of you who don't know Harry Jaffa, have not read him, you should. New Birth of Freedom is not a bad place to start. He writes of Jaffa and Calvin Coolidge and Barry Goldwater, and Jaffa was a speechwriter, principal author actually of Goldwater's Extremism in the Defense of Liberty is No Vice, Moderation in the Pursuit of Justice is No Virtue. Yeah, obviously it didn't win him the presidency in '64, but it did provide him the position as one of the intellectual leaders of the conservative movement for the subsequent couple of decades. In 1926, President Coolidge, had this to say: "We live in an age of science and abounding accumulation of material things. These did not create our declaration created them. The things of the spirit come first, and unless we cling to them, all our material prosperity, overwhelming though it may appear, will turn into a barren scepter in our grasp." Well, that sounds like words that could apply 100 years later. Harry Jaffa, the man himself, in 1990. "Today we are faced with an unprecedented threat to the survival of biblical religion, of autonomous human reason, and to the form and substance of political freedom. It's important to understand why the threat to one of these is also the threat to all. It is above all important to understand why the threat is an internal one, mining and sapping our ancient faith both in God and in ourselves." And Elmer suggests that recalling the wisdom of Jaffa as expressed through Goldwater and a precursor, President Coolidge, probably the order of the day, particularly with that observation that he offers from Coolidge, which I think is absolutely on the mark for today. For more on today, we're pleased to be joined by Roger Ream, president of the Fund for American Studies, a foundation for teaching economics. Roger, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Oh, wonderful to be with you and Amy today, Dan.
Well, first of all, congratulations. I understand that you are a recipient of the 2021 Bradley Prize, the Bradley Foundation puts out for defenders of free minds and free markets. So congratulations on that.
Well, thank you. It was quite an honor given the recipients in the past. It's a very distinguished company. They've given it to Larry Arnn, Hillsdale's president, since you referenced Hillsdale, and to people like Tom Sowell and Mitch Daniels and Chicago's own Randy Barnett, a great constitutional scholar. So I was very honored to receive this award.
Well, and you received the award because of the work the Fund for American Studies does and has been doing for decades. I'm actually a graduate of one of their programs. I mentioned before the comparative political and economic systems program that you do, and I just was thinking about the fund in the context of this piece by Glenn Elmers about the whole man philosophy of the individual, the whole person philosophy. And the institutions that do the work to present and to try to promote this idea of the sort of the Aristotelian idea of the whole man, and the Fund for American Studies is one of them.
Yeah, I really appreciate that reference made, or Dr. Elmers made, to Calvin Coolidge's 1926 speech. That was on the occasion of the 150th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. If parents want to do one thing to help their children understand our founding, I would recommend you read Coolidge's speech. It's just a classic. And Coolidge, one thing Coolidge says in there, and I haven't talked to scholars to ask where he found this, but he paraphrases Thomas Jefferson as having said everything that Jefferson said he learned about democratic government he learned while sitting in church pews. And I found that interesting because we often forget that our founding was based on really biblical religious principles, as well as the principles of John Locke and other great thinkers. But that's, I think, relates back to your idea of the whole man. We need to make sure that we are a religious people if we hope to maintain our freedom in this country, because freedom requires responsibility and moral behavior by its citizens.
In your acceptance speech of this award, the Bradley Prize, the other week, you talked about economics and how economics should be properly taught. Your perspective on that?
Yeah, they give you 7 minutes to speak on any subject you like, and I started off thinking about American exceptionalism and what is it that makes this country exceptional. And I thought the one area of freedom that's important to everyone in this country is economic liberty. It really comes down to the idea that we can pursue our happiness unencumbered by government. And so I talked about economic liberty and how important that is and how transformative it was in our country. I mentioned if you look at virtually any sector of our economy, from farming to transportation to healthcare to consumer appliances to technology, people free to pursue their happiness have transformed our country. 150 years ago, it took 6 months to travel from New York to San Francisco because you'd have to ride a horse or go in a wagon. Not long after that, it took 6 days by taking a train or a car, and now it takes 6 hours or less. And in every sector, you see that kind of innovation, invention, creativity, because of economic freedom. If government stays out of the way, free men and free women, and increasingly in this country, it took some time to free women and blacks and others to participate fully in the economy, but they've done such remarkable things that I said our free enterprise system, capitalism, is the world's greatest anti-poverty program.
Yeah, and you also use the phrase in your remarks, peaceful cooperation, which isn't used enough in describing free market economics. So for all this talk from the left of collaboration and community and people need to work together and so on and so forth, well, that's exactly what capitalism provides. It's based on peaceful cooperation, mutually beneficial exchanges of goods and services. And so they should be embracing that. And the fact that they say one thing about collaboration and community and working together and oppose doing precisely that in an economic sense says something about the intellectual heft of their position, I think.
That's right. Socialism is about conflict. It's top down. And you see that wherever it's been tried, from the old Soviet Union, East Germany, to Cuba and Venezuela. To what Bernie Sanders wants to do. He wants to impose his policies on us, whereas free enterprise is bottom up. The decisions are made by consumers in the marketplace. They are the ones through their purchases that direct producers to produce the things they want at prices they can afford. So it's whether you want a top-down command and control system directed from Washington, D.C., or whether you want bottom-up consumer sovereignty where the people have the power in the marketplace. And that's really the key distinction. So it's too bad. Most young people who say they like socialism more than capitalism really don't understand fully what socialism involves.
And
Someone
continue.
Someone said, I was going to say, you go in a place like Venezuela, you go from owning pets to eating your pets eventually under socialism.
That's true.
It's tragic.
Oh, it's awful. But you talk about through all this process, though, you need to serve the needs of others. Can you explain?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I like to, cite the example of, I don't know, maybe one of you stopped at Starbucks or some coffee shop to pick up coffee this morning.
Dunkin'
and there was
Donuts.
someone there at Dunkin' Donuts, and there were people there at 6 a.m. just there because they knew you're going to stop by, Amy, and look to get some coffee this morning. Why do they do it? Because they like Amy and they listen to her show and want to make sure she's awake and has coffee. Well, you like to think that, but it's really because they want to earn a living. And so they go into work to do that. Pilots take hours and hours training to fly airplanes to get us safety to our destination. Because as Adam Smith said, it's them wanting to serve their interests, but the only way to do that in a free market economy with peaceful cooperation is by serving the needs of others. That's how you get ahead and serve yourself as well and serve your family's needs. So there's so many examples of that in a free market economy, we're all out there serving each other. The great example is a man who goes into the store to buy some Christmas presents, and when he checks out, he says, thank you to the clerk, and the clerk says, thank you. And he says, you're really busy. Well, this is the busiest day of the year. It's really a great day for us. We're selling so many things. And then he goes to the post office to mail the things. And the guy at the post office, he says, hey, it's really a busy day today. He goes, yeah, it's the worst day of the year. And that's the difference between the private-owned company and the government. So the government being busy is the worst day of the year.
Right. Yeah, that's the old Steve Forbes line about the healthcare. Only in healthcare is more customers called a crisis. Right, more customers with more demands. That's called a crisis. Every other business, it's an opportunity. In healthcare, we call that a crisis. I wanted to get your reaction because Fund for American Studies has been doing programs for college kids for 45 years. And this development that's happened on campus, there's been a recent run of articles on something we've been talking about here for some time, which is fewer and fewer big men on campus because there's fewer and fewer men on campus, period. 60-40 is basically the distribution right now on college campuses. 60% women, 40% men. This is almost a 180 from 50 years ago. And there's consequences to that, and there's concerns raised. And for those who don't think that, what would we be saying if it was still 60-40 men to women, and we would call that a crisis too, or certainly some would. So I just wonder what you think about that, the disappearing men on campus. Is that a problem for the future of America?
Well, yeah, I saw there's a piece today in the Journal on that topic. I've read some things in other publications in the recent weeks about the latest data on that, and you have to ask yourself, why is that happening? We notice it in our programs too. It's even maybe more pronounced, our ratios of the college students that come to our programs. I think it probably has something to do with what the academy's become today. It's not that friendly to men in certain ways, I guess. I'm thinking of, and these things affect women too, and maybe to some degree. But I have a friend who heads up one of the largest fraternities in the country, and there's just been a war on fraternities going on some 15, 20 years, and that probably is not helpful. I think education in K through 12, I've read at least that it's becoming that the way they teach is becoming more attuned to the way women learn versus men learn, and I think there are probably differences in that regard, but I'm not an expert on that. But at least that's a diagnosis I've read.
Yeah, and this is not, Richard Vedder, the piece you're talking about in the Journal, Richard Vedder from the Independent Institute, who teaches at Ohio U, said, look, it's great news. More women are going to college, entering positions of leadership, business, politics. Okay, fine. And nobody's quibbling with that. But men adrift, not keeping up at school, struggling to form families, succeed. Profound consequences on the nation's economic prospects and political leadership, profound consequences on Western civilization. And if you don't believe that, then look at men adrift in places like our urban centers. If you think that men don't matter and men adrift is not impactful on everybody's quality of life. So that's something for consideration.
Yeah, it's been said that if you want to be successful in life, you have to do 4 things and do them in the right order. And that's graduate from high school, get a job, get married, and have children. And if you don't do them in that order, it can be an economic burden on you. But what we found is, to do those things, some of those steps take a man and a woman. To get married, to have children, you should, and we've seen the destruction of the American family caused in large part, I think, by government policies that discourage men to stay married and women to stay married. So we've had our policy screwed up since the 1960s in terms of the incentives that it creates. And we better address these issues of and make sure those that do go through high school and graduate from college have the skills to be successful in life. I mean, that's probably the bigger issue.
He is Roger Ream, president of Fund for American Studies Foundation for Teaching Economics. Go to tfas.org, tfas.org for more information on fund programs. If you've got a kid in college, it's definitely worth checking out. Spend a summer in Washington, D.C. learning and interning and getting on your way. Roger Ream, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good to be with you both. Thank you.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is the morning show more Chicago radio listeners are choosing. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
The Lou Dobbs Financial Report is